Hello and welcome to a special segment with writer, director, actor, stand-up comic Karthik Kumar. Sir, hello and welcome. Vanakkam, mikka mikka nandri for talking to us on India Today.
Happy to
We're
be
going to
here,
be
Anita.
we're going to be talking about what went down with Kunal Kamra and the freedom of expression, speech. And since you have been in the stand-up comic space for the longest time now, we would love to hear your thoughts on this whole fiasco that has unfolded. Karthik, as a stand-up comic yourself, do you feel that the freedom of expression has been stifled now more than ever? Should the government now start to introspect, relook, and rejig its stance as to what's defamatory and what's criticism? While the former is objectionable, the latter is acceptable. So, how do you differentiate between the two?
I think both politicians and stand-up comics are answerable to the Constitution only from a legal perspective. Is what Kunal Kamara said unconstitutional or illegal? Absolutely not. Does he have the right to say whatever he does, whether it's good or bad, or whether it's good form or bad form, or oh, such bad things comedians end up saying? It's no, it's not illegal or unconstitutional, and that's the same reason why political hate speeches, which are just as frivolous, stupid, and sometimes even clownish, gets passed today in our country. So I think you should deal with this from a very constitutional perspective because both politicians and stand-up comics both are citizens of this country.
Well, like you mentioned, how politicians make such frivolous speeches and get away with it while stand up comics are being targeted. Do you think that this is because, stand up comics and artists are relatively vulnerable? They wouldn't have the kind of contacts that ordinarily a politician would do. Do you think this is stemming from that? How artists are most importantly being targeted?
I can understand politicians who are fighting for validation from the voters as such, but we are talking about the chief minister and the deputy chief minister of a state. They're representative of every single citizen. Every voice of dissent is also something that they represent. This is tantamount to saying, oh, if he said something against us, then our Kar Sevaks and our Shiv Sainiks will do whatever they want and whatever they feel is like actually saying, if the person I voted for as a citizen does not become the chief minister, I have the right not to pay taxes right now. In fact, I'm going to be absolutely throwing a tantrum by breaking this system right now and not paying my taxes. I am sure Kunal Kamra pays his taxes. He pays his taxes in good measure. All stand-up comics have almost similar auditors. I'm aware of that, and we are actually very upright, tax-paying citizens. And I think he has a right to have a say. And if his venue that he's performing at, if his safety can be thrown in jeopardy because he said something in resistance, in opposition to the view of the current ruling party, and if that leaves him vulnerable, it leaves the entire country vulnerable right now to politicians who want to have an autocratic, anarchist way of having their say.
What looks as defamatory to one section appears to be criticism to another section. So, what's that entity that really decides this? Because we cannot really be running to the court and the judiciary for every single content that's being put out. It's going to take a really long time to bring justice, given the fact that YouTube and social media are so much more democratized. Anybody with a phone can start putting out whatever's there on their minds without any regulation or filters. Most importantly, given the fact that it's so much more crowded now, we cannot expect every single person to be self regulated. So, do you think that the time has finally arrived for YouTube to be regulated by a government or even an independent body for that matter? What's the entity that's going to bring in checks and balances and curb the kind of hate speech that's being put online?
Ironically, I don't trust the government to be able to regulate the country, leave alone YouTube right now. Right? I think if the government's job was to start regulating the people, then in that case, the government is going to find itself with a capacity issue that they can't handle it. The government is literally serving the people, not regulating and controlling the people.
So who should regulate the content that's being put out?
I think we are in a democratic medium right now. Today, I think stupidity should have a place in this country. What I consider stupid should has the right to exist. What I consider offensive has the right to exist, and it does exist. I see so many political hate speeches right now that exist in the ether and
Mm.
they cause my blood to boil. But just because my blood boils does not mean that I have the right to be absolutely threatening to another person who had these views and said these views. We live in an tolerant ecosystem, and that's the tenet of democracy is tolerance. That you tolerate what you consider offensive, stupid, and absolutely has no right to exist, but exists because they pay the same taxes as you in the country. They are subject to the same laws of the land, and they are your brethren, even if you hate them. And in fact, if you hate them, they are more brethren than yours because we don't really love our family, do we?
But the kind of offensive statement that a stand-up comic makes, given the fact that stand-up comics have their way with words, they have the gift of the gab.
No, they don't say
And
anything more offensive than others. Their offensive statements
hmm,
gather more momentum and validation from the world, right? And the people who laugh at it are not offended by it. So the people who laugh at it probably find it funny or agree with it. So what one considers offensive, another considers as music, right? The prayers from a nearby temple to me are offensive or music to my ears, depending on what religion I subscribe to,
hmm,
right? And this is a country that tolerates all kinds of music and all kinds of noise. Every music is noise and every noise is music, right? And we are in that tolerant ecosystem. I hope we continue to exist in that tolerant ecosystem. And
hmm,
at the end of the day, the intention of a stand up comic is to stir a thought, provoke laughter. And we are talking about right now, we're putting the stand up comedian in the same platform as somebody who's stirred by feeling that they go and cause physical threat and violent
yeah,
murder attacks upon the comic. How are we placing both of them in the same pedestal? The pedestal is wrong.
right. So, Karthik, even in Chennai, not just in Maharashtra, but in Chennai as well, a YouTuber's house was ransacked.
Absolutely.
Certain people disguised under the name of sanitation workers, they barged inside his house, started pouring sewage water with feces all around his house, threatened his mother. Then they also video called him to show, hey, look, how are we torturing your mother and your house. Subsequently, he had to bring down his YouTube channel that was dedicated to talking about politics and politicians.
Yeah.
Does it somewhere alarm you, Karthik, because you are also in the same content creation space? Does it, stir some fear inside you? Because the messaging is very clear. You speak against the government, think twice before talking anything, against the government. Does it alarm you in some way?
It does two things to me. One, it reminds me that I need to be more careful in the future,
Hmm.
but it reminds me that I have the greater responsibility of being the voice of truth or speaking against power, right? Speaking to power is the most critical thing, and the YouTuber that you're mentioning right now is probably one of the most important voices in Tamil Nadu today. I support his voice. In fact, I will go find, even if he went underground today, he went into a deep cave and went AWOL and send out digital messages tomorrow into the ether. I will find those digital messages and I will multiply it. And I don't care whether he's right or wrong. As long as he's the voice of resistance, he has a right to exist and he has a right to continue. And I would implore and I would beg such voices to exist in the ether at all points of time. I would multiply them as long as I have the power to do so.
Are you walking on eggshells now while creating content? Are you
Uh,
more,
I'm
used?
more careful and I'm more careful and I ensure that I'm absolutely in the right as far as the law of the land is concerned. Because that's the only thing I will not be disrespectful towards. And all of us as comedians also are very, very careful about, are we legally in the right? Tomorrow, if this were to go to court,
Hmm.
however big the court is, whether it's the Supreme Court or just a court that's handling bylaws right now, I want to be in the right as far as being a citizen. In every other way, I can be arm twisted, I can be threatened, I can even be beaten up, and journalists have been killed in this country. All
Hmm.
right, so all that is, I think, par for the course right now. And stand-up comedians who are literally uh, provoking thought and laughter right now are now fearing for their lives. I mean, it does not get more dystopian than that.
Is it a very gray area because you seem to, self-regulate your content, but we cannot expect all comics to do that. So, do you think there must be an authority above it all to just overlook the content that's being put out?
I think it's our responsibility as citizens right now to watch what we want and consume what we want and turn away from what we don't want, and
Not
we do
every
that.
comic is responsible.
No, every comic is every citizen. How is a comic more valuable or less responsible than a citizen? We are the only reason why we are extra responsible right now and extra careful right now is because we face a lot of resistance and hate, and a lot of attention is upon us, and therefore we are careful. We are careful in the name of legality, and we are careful in the name of safety to ourselves. All right. In spite of that, we are easy targets right now, and that says a lot about how absurdly we are functioning as a society. And I don't think this is how the citizens of this country view it. Every person who thinks that this should exist or should happen definitely has a political agenda. I think citizens of the country right now are do not have time or space for anything that in any way condones violence or encourages obscenities and hooliganism.
Okay, so you are saying that stand-up comics are citizens and they are capable of self-regulating themselves.
No, we are equally capable or incapable of it. That's all.
Okay, and you
And at
are
the end of the day, if we are saying something unconstitutional or not, definitely not illegal, if you say something stupid, please feel free to ignore us. Please feel free to ignore us. We're very easy to ignore. So easy to ignore.
but can they really be ignored given the kind of fan following they all have got?
Everything can be ignored if you choose to ignore it.
You also made a statement, very interesting one, that stand-up comics are politicians of tomorrow and politicians are stand-up comics of today.
Yeah, I suspect that politicians think of us as competition. Politicians think of us as being extremely significant in forming opinion. I think they're very scared of the power that we hold, and I blame comedians for not realizing that power. The politicians have identified our power much before us. They have helped us discover that we are actually superheroes and not just clowns. And I really thank the politicians for having given us that power and, of course, treating us as being so valuable that you need to wage many wars against us.
Hmm.
Wow, we are a nation with so much power, and our jokes are not jokes anymore. Our jokes are actually nuclear weapons. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, we are nuclear armed right now, which means that good, man. So good, interesting. So we should be even more careful and even more protective of the jokes because we realize that jokes are not jokes anymore. They're actually power.
Okay. That's it about the freedom of speech. Thank you so much. On a
Thank
on
you.
a
Yeah.
on a completely other topic, would you like to give us a small sneak peek as to what next are you working on with your stand-up? Is there a special coming up? What are you working on now?
I am actually today, right now in Singapore, where we're pulling off Asia's or probably world's first drive-in stand-up comedy show. So, which means 80 cars are going to drive in into a drive-in kind of atmosphere and watch a stand-up comedy show. And
Mm,
this is kind of a new format altogether, and that's what I'm in Singapore for. So it's a new format that will probably change the art of stand-up comedy.
mm.
Just a year back, I released my special into the movie theaters. So you got to see a stand-up comedy special in the movie theaters for the first time. So I think I'm excited to do things that are
Was it
innovative,
dance
and
planning?
it was answering. That's right.
Lovely. What are you working on next? Are you working on another special?
My new show is intended for next year, so I'm right now in the writing of it. And like we discussed right now, I'm going to be extra careful to ensure that I'm in the legal right with whatever I say.
All right. All the best, Karthik. It was lovely
Thank you,
talking
Anika.
to you. Bye
Pleasure.
bye.
Pleasure. Thank you.